This is the first time we've actually seen the sheriff in about a month. He was taken into federal custody on October 14th, I do believe is the date, after the federal judge revoked his bond and had him sent to jail in the custody of federal marshals, basically on a charge of essentially his handcuffing of a jail commissioner. And later he was indicted on about 4 counts of witness tampering. That's actually what he was sent to jail over, on those counts of witness tampering. Anyway, this is the first time we've actually seen Sheriff Montgomery in about a month. This is the first time we've seen Sheriff Montgomery in about a month. They brought him into the courtroom. Two marshals, federal marshals, brought him in, slowly, walking slowly. He was handcuffed and also in leg shackles. He was obviously not saying anything, walking quietly. It looked like he lost quite a bit of weight in the month that he has been incarcerated. They took him over to his defense table, where the sheriff sat quietly and kind of conferring with his attorneys, his counsels, as the federal marshals basically sat behind him throughout the entire time. And it was that way for him until there was a lunch break that was taken, not that long ago. The judge dismissed everybody for lunch, and the marshals stood him up and took him out of the courthouse, so presumably so he could get lunch as well. It has been a long morning, actually. At one point, the judge did give everybody about a 10-minute break, because a lot of the testimony, which primarily was of Tammy Ross, the acting jail commissioner at the time of one of the accusations against the sheriff, took place. She was the woman who was handcuffed by Sheriff Montgomery. And so that was one of the charges in this case that's brought by the Missouri Attorney General's office. The case originally brought by Andrew Bailey. Now, of course, Catherine Hanaway. Catherine Hanaway is the Missouri Attorney General, with Andrew Bailey having gone on to the feds, and she is pushing this case as tough and as hard as Andrew Bailey did. So said that he has been in custody. One of the main points of the day, again, was the questioning of Tammy Ross. She was the acting jail commissioner. And so one of the serious allegations of this, and what brought about a federal misdemeanor charge, was the sheriff ordering his deputies to handcuff her because she would not let them go and interview a victim who accused a deputy of sexually assaulting her. So that was the subject, as well as cross-examination. That they've spent about 2 points. The judge, at a number of points, appeared a little bit impatient, wanting to kind of move the pace along and wanting to try to get the questioning to get right to the point. So that is the key, and I think the prosecution is saying, essentially prosecution being the Missouri Attorney General's office, saying that that was illegal, that should not have been done, that violated her civil rights, with the defense trying to say, well, she was wrong in impeding the sheriff's department's investigators from going and talking to the witness. So that's kind of been the central, and she's kind of a central part of all this. You could tell the importance of it because, like I said, the questioning and the cross-examination has been going on for about 2 hours now. It's one of the key points in this case. There are a number of other charges that the Missouri is making of the sheriff. One, not properly transporting prisoners to the hospital, as the Attorney General's office said that was the sheriff's duty. Sheriff's lawyer said no, it wasn't. And also using a deputy to take his kids back and forth to school. And they say that was using public property, essentially using taxpayer benefits for his own personal use, and they are trying to make that cause, and obviously the defense is saying no. This is day one. It was supposed to be, the trial was supposed to start yesterday, but the feds did not deliver Sheriff Montgomery. I think his lawyers said essentially that they had asked the feds about a week ago to make him available for the trial. The marshals did not make him, the federal officials, and I think they needed the judge's okay and everything. The feds did not make him available yesterday. The lawyers met with the feds on into the late evening yesterday to try to get a deal, to try to get the arrangements made. I think he's being kept he's been kept outside of the St. Louis area. He is being jailed. It is outside of the St. Louis area, obviously. And so arrangements had to be made to get the federal marshals to get the sheriff here. They didn't get him yesterday. They did get him today. His attorneys have been working with the feds, talking to him yesterday to try to hammer out that deal and make sure that the feds that the federal marshals got the sheriff here so he could be at his trial today. Judge Stephen Omer, who's the state judge who's hearing this case, had said yesterday he didn't see starting the trial without the sheriff because he had a right to be at his own trial. And so that extra effort, I think, was likely made to make sure they got the sheriff here to his trial. One of the challenging parts, obviously, of this whole deal is going to be, well, certainly, like I told you, these allegations and charges that are against the sheriff. They're one handcuffing the acting jail commissioner, and those other allegations and charges of misspending. One of the major problems in this case, certainly for the sheriff, is going to be the fact that he's in jail. And that's what caused Judge Omer to temporarily strip him of his title in the first place. The Judge Omer had initially said that he didn't see stripping the sheriff of his title because he believed everybody was entitled to a trial. And so his belief was that the sheriff, even if he was on house arrest at the time, and so even if he was on house arrest, Judge Omer says he could still adequately run the office remotely. He seemed to allow for the fact that even if he was in jail, he'd be able to somehow still be the sheriff. But that was before he was actually arrested. After he was arrested, Judge Omer, it was a different tune. And one of the reasons is that the sheriff did not even show up for a hearing. Now, keep in mind, the sheriff is in custody. He can only go where the feds take him. So it's not like the sheriff doesn't show up for a hearing or didn't show up for his trial. It's like he's in federal custody. And so he can only do what they allow him to do. He can only go where they take him. They don't just let you walk out of the jail. He's in a jail cell. He's in jail. So they don't just let you walk out of a jail and go where you want to go. All kinds of stuff has to happen. The judge has to okay it. The federal marshals have to get you there, and that there are a lot of things. And so what happened was the judge, I think, changed his tune. First, he was saying that the sheriff should be able to keep his office until the trial. But then when he was actually in custody behind bars, when he actually did not show up for the judge's hearing, the judge said essentially he didn't see how the sheriff could run his office in jail behind bars. He said he didn't see how that was possible. And so the defense was trying their best to try to convince the judge that it was possible, that they were communicating with the sheriff, that they were getting him information, that they were going down there all the time to communicate with him, and they were trying to impress that upon the judge. But I could see the judge steadily just shaking his head that it just wasn't registering with him after all, even though he had been predisposed to let the sheriff keep his job until the trial. But after he was jailed, the judge then temporarily stripped the sheriff of his office. Chief John Hayton is now the acting sheriff. And one of the problems is going to be is that the same judge that temporarily stripped him of his office is going to be making the final decision in this case. And even though it was, the judge was kind of able to get past a lot of some of the other allegations, it seemed like the one that registered most with him was the fact that the sheriff was in jail, the fact that the sheriff was behind bars. He didn't see how the sheriff could run the office and be behind bars all at the same time. For the sheriff was that the appeal was denied. Now, his attorneys were appealing the bond termination. They were appealing the fact that his bond was revoked and that the sheriff was thrown into jail. They went to a court of appeals saying, hey, that was not fair, that was not right, that should be overturned by the court of appeals in order to let the sheriff be able to make bond and get out. Court of appeals, though, turned down the sheriff's plea, turned down that request. So basically, the sheriff is going to be in jail unless something dramatic happens. I don't know what that could be. The sheriff is going to be in jail until trial. That could be a year from now. You don't know how long. You never know how long it's going to take a case to come to trial, but often it's not quick. And I think the feds don't have any motivation or impetus, any reason really to speed this up and make it a speedy trial. So it could be a year from now before the sheriff actually, it could be a year from now. I'm going to move away because one of the witnesses are coming back to court. And that is the lady who'd been on the stand all morning. So I'm just going to move away so she cannot hear me. And I'm looking at her walk in, Tammy Ross. I'm looking at her walk in, but I am not going to be within earshot of her, and I'm not going to take a picture of her because that would be irresponsible. So I'm not going to do that. So I've just kind of gotten out of the way. But the problem, she's inside now. But the problem, the problem facing the sheriff is with that appeal being denied, then he could be in jail. He'll likely be in federal custody until the trial. Until the trial finally happens. Well, that could be a year from now. And so the question then comes down to, probably for the judge, is, well, if he didn't think the sheriff could run the office temporarily, how does he believe that the sheriff can run it long term, like going a year in jail? How does the office run? And so that's one of the things in consideration that the judge is going to have to make. And to really make that point, the Missouri Attorney General's office filed a further charge against the sheriff saying that because he was behind bars, because he was in federal custody, he could not run the office, he could not do his duty, and therefore should be ousted. Quo warranto, I think is what the effort is called. But they're saying, and they added this onto the others, and this actually might be the strongest charge accusation against the sheriff. They're saying because he's in custody, there's no way that he can perform his duties. There's no way he can run that office in custody behind bars, and he could be behind bars for a year. So the question becomes, if the sheriff, for example, won this case, well, who would be the acting sheriff? How would that work out? Could it work out? And so, but that would be logistics for the judge and everybody to consider. But that's certainly something that's weighing on the judge's mind, and that is probably one of the strongest accusations right now. And I only say that, I'm not saying that's legitimate or not legitimate. I'm saying that's something that certainly is in the back of the judge's mind, because he temporarily stripped Alfred Montgomery temporarily of his office because he was in jail, and he couldn't see how the sheriff could run his office in jail. And so now the Missouri Attorney General's office added that to its list of accusations. There are about 6 accusations or so, and so they added that one to the list of accusations that, well, he's in custody. There's no way he can run the office. That was kind of the argument, which was kind of cut and dry, and they're saying there's no way he can do it. And so that's going to be something that defense is going to have to try to argue, and going to try to convince a judge who already seems predisposed not to believe that Alfred can run the office in federal custody. And now that his appeal has failed, it looks like he's going to be in custody until the trial hits. And like I said, that could happen. He could be in jail a year. Hard to believe right now that the sheriff has been behind bars for just over a month now. October 14th is when his bond was revoked, federal bond was revoked, and he was ordered remanded to the custody of the federal marshals. And that was, like I said, October 14th. So October 14th is when that happened, about a little more than a month ago right now, that he was put behind bars, remanded to the custody of the federal marshals, and taken to jail. And so it's hard to, like I said, hard to believe it's been a month that the sheriff has been in jail. High stakes on this one, because if he loses this and is permanently relieved of this job, his paycheck would stop. It's for one thing, and the sheriff has a couple of kids to take care of, but his paycheck would stop. And so you look at that your paycheck stops and you're behind bars. It's like the worst of all worlds in that. And so that's the situation a lot of people are wondering. And what a lot of people were wondering outside was that why did the sheriff have to go to jail? There are people who certainly have committed worse crimes than the sheriff. There are murderers, robbers, whatever the case might be, that have been able to post bond and get out of jail. And so there are hardcore criminals that are in jail, and that the sheriff is not a threat to the public at large. He made a mistake, obviously, with his using the phones to contact witnesses. Obviously, that was a bad mistake. The defense was trying to iron out some ways that the sheriff could be let back out on bond and would not do the same thing, and would have seen the error of his ways and would be reformed. But the federal judge says no, he couldn't see any way that that could happen. He couldn't see any way that he could let the sheriff back out on bond and have him not commit these same or worse crimes. And so the federal judge refused to back down from that, and the Court of Appeals agreed with the federal judge. And so there he is. One thing about the feds is they take witness tampering ultra seriously. I don't know whether the sheriff is guilty of that or not.